Okay, it is 2 o'clock. Welcome to our April Reliability and Security Oversight Monthly Update. My name is Mailee Cook, and I am a Training and Outreach Specialist here at WECC. We have an announcement for you that our Reliability in the West discussion series will be on May 1st at 11 a.m. till noon. The topic this coming discussion series is the Summer Outlook, and it will discuss the operational risks and conditions expected across the Western Interconnection during the summer season. So we will have the link to register for that in the chat for you. And now for our antitrust policy. All WECC meetings are conducted in accordance with the WECC antitrust policy and the NERC antitrust compliance guidelines. All participants must comply with the policy and guidelines. This meeting is public. Confidential or proprietary information should not be discussed in open session. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. By participating, you give your consent for your name, voice, image, and likeness to be included in that recording. WECC strives to ensure the information presented today is accurate and reflects the views of WECC. However, all interpretations and positions are subject to change. If you have any questions, please contact WECC's legal counsel. We enjoy having you participate in these calls. Feel free to send your questions via the chat feature to WECC meetings, or at the appropriate moment, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you and allow you to ask your question aloud. Our agenda today will start with an industry subject matter expert program update from me, and then following that section, we will move on to risk management process and register, which will be presented by Scott Brooksby and Greg Park. So our industry subject matter expert program, I'm also called the ISME program. I'm excited to remind or refresh your memories of this program. It was first introduced at our October workshop in 2023. It's a program allowed under NERC's rules of procedure and is a volunteer opportunity where you come and participate in one of our audit engagements. And this allows you to lend your strengths and expertise to WECC's audit engagements, and we share best practices. You get to see behind the audit curtain, and we launched this program after seeing the success of CERC's program that is similar. Next. To participate, we do need you to apply. To do that, you'll provide a short bio, and if you are accepted in the program, you will be asked to sign a conflict of interest and non-disclosure agreement, and then we will also provide NERC auditor training to you on gathering the quality of evidence and the foundations of auditing. Next. I wanted to take a moment to talk about what you would do if you were to participate in this program, what involvement you're allowed to have. And as you can see here on the screen, you would participate in evidence reviews, interviews with the entity being audited, daily debriefs with the audit team, and site tours if applicable. You are not allowed to call potential findings or offer areas of concern or formal recommendations. Those will still come through the WECC audit team, but you would obviously participate in all the things that might lead to those, but that part is not part of your duties. Next. As a participant in this program, it is voluntary. You would be responsible for your own flight, hotel, meals, rental vehicles, and other incidentals. So there is a cost to participating in that regard, but we just want to be upfront about that. Next, please. So a quick moment to discuss the benefits of this program. As they say, a rising tide raises all boats. So sharing our audit practices and expertise with your experience and expertise, it makes us all better, and we have a more reliable and secure interconnection. Your fresh perspectives are really beneficial to our audit team. It provides opportunity for your growth and development. You will be better prepared for your next audit. We have that sharing experience of compliance methods, and then also you're able to observe all aspects of the audit. Next. This slide's probably the most important, I guess, of all after we've introduced what it is. So we did do a pilot, and it was successful through Southern California Edison. And we are now ready to expand this program beyond the standards that we use the ISME program for at that pilot engagement. We have built an internal SharePoint for ourselves that houses all the applications and profiles and the documentation we need. And so now our public facing application is live. So I will drop the link to that application in the chat so you're able to access it there. And then if you're just navigating on our webpage, you can go from WECC.org and follow that crumb trail to get to the application. Once you submit that, it will be assessed and the ISME program manager will contact you to discuss your involvement. So that is it for this part. If we have any questions, I will try to answer them. I may have to refer them all to Brady because he's the true expert on this. Let me just double check if there's any questions. I'm not seeing any, but thank you for your time today. And hopefully this program is something you're interested in that you can apply for. So we'll now go on to Scott and Greg for their part of this presentation today.
Excellent. Thank you, Mailee. Let me get the right screen to share here. Now let me move some windows around. Sorry, one sec. I thought I could keep the chat window open, but it disappeared as soon as I started sharing. All right. Well, Greg, Mailee, if you'll keep an eye on the chat for me. So we're here to talk about the risk management process that WECC with the RRC has developed over the course of just a little over a year and the resulting risk register. So we hope that this is going to have a lot of participation from you. If you'll drop stuff in the chat, raise your hand. We want to get your questions answered. We can take the hardball questions. Matter of fact, sometimes I love the hardball questions, so feel free. So real quick, just introductions. Greg Park, who's on with me. He's my partner in crime in analyzing risk for the Western Interconnection. He's responsible mostly for the operational, and I'm cyber physical, and I've been dabbling into extreme natural events. So, and you're going to see kind of more of that and what we're talking about here in a little bit. We're just kind of wetting your whistle. So pretty simple agenda. We've got a risk management process that has been developed, and we've got the resultant risk register as the title of the presentation says. So I'm going to jump right into it. But I do want to kind of get your thinking about, well, why am I listening to this? What, what's in it for me? What's good about this? What can I do with this? Why am I using my time over the next 30 minutes to listen to you? And we're hoping you kind of get a few takeaways from this. One, we want this to augment your own risk assessment work. So anything that you may be doing to assess risk for your entity or within your region, maybe you're working with your peers, we're hoping you'll take this away and you'll use that to help bolster yours. We've actually talked with a couple of entities and came in and done some presentations to them as they go over their own risk assessment, and they want to kind of get some more back information to this process. We're happy to come and present to your entities as well. You can just reach out to myself or Greg, or the email address risk@wec.org if you would like that, or if you would like to understand maybe how that can augment your work. We're also looking at this as kind of centralizing risk statements. So when we say things like terms like wildfire, what does that mean, right? What is wildfire risk, right? And we're working together with industry partners to define what those mean. And we've got a lot of maturity to go there. So we still want your participation in developing what these risks are. When we talk malware, when we talk insider threat, there's all of these things, and you're going to see more about this here not too long. But we all kind of want to be singing from the same hymn book, as it were, so that when we say these terms, we know what we're talking about, and we know what the conditions and consequences of these risks are that face the Western Interconnection. We want you to understand this risk assessment process is backed by the ISO 31000 model. So that's what we've adopted here, and we're going to kind of get a little bit more into that. But understanding that there's many good risk assessment methodologies out there. We're just using this one because it's mature, it's been around for a while, and it's working well so far. And we also want you to understand, WECC and the regional focus for the future. So this risk register, this risk process is going to be used and has been used already to inform NERC through the CME PIP areas of focus, through other risk work. We know that NERC has their own risk register. We're looking to both get feedback from that process and into it. And all of that ends up shaping kind of the work and the focus. We've now got WECC and the board of directors going through the regional risk priorities for the next couple of years. And this work is kind of at the heart of that. And that process is going on. And there we'll define, okay, where are we going to start putting our efforts, right? Are we getting the right cost benefit on addressing the right risk? So that's kind of what's in it for you as you really think about this, and it really will impact you, in my opinion. But that's me. I'm at the center of this. I feel like it's great work, but I think it's going to impact people, and I think you may see that in the future. So just real quick for those who, even if you're an expert in the ISO 31000 risk model, this is just a refresher. This is just a graphic that comes out of it. It's pretty straightforward. If you've done any risk assessment methodology, it's going to be 90% the same as what you see on here. So you go through, you basically build out what's your scope, what's your intent, right? In our case, our scope is the Western interconnection. What is risk to the bulk power system? That kind of thing. That's all been developed. And we went through an initial, over the last 12 months, risk assessment and risk identification process. And I'm going to show you the results of this here coming up. And we've been through this risk analysis work, risk evaluation. And we're sitting right here below this chevron at the moment. So we are in this between risk evaluation and risk treatment. We've kicked off some of this risk treatment, but we don't know what that's going to look like quite yet. At the same time, you can kind of see out here these arrows on the outside. We're also reevaluating some information. We've got additional risks that are coming in that need to be evaluated and go through this. So this is very much a life cycle. Don't think of this as anything that is static or the whole thing is in any one given step. We're kind of in all of this at once, but for the bulk, this is kind of where we're at right now. So just this is a high level, kind of give you a sense of what went into it. Again, if you're familiar with risk assessment methodologies, this will look familiar. We've had to go through, build out the risks, and this is a very key step, because and it's amazing how much the English language fails you when you start trying to talk about these. So when you talk about wildfires, for example, when somebody says the word wildfire, you instantly think, okay, I know what that is, right? The forests catch on fire and that's the risk. But really we have to think about, what is the condition we're talking about? Are we talking about the condition where the electric grid causes the start of the fire, and what is the consequence of that? Or are we talking about the condition where the wildfire gets started through some other means, right? Some negligence elsewhere, a lightning strike or whatever, and then what's the impact to the grid when we didn't expect it, right? What does it do when it creates smoke over our solar panels, right? What does it do when it makes us shut down or de-energize systems we didn't expect it, right? When it changes wind conditions, you name it, right? Getting the English right on what's the condition, consequence, and cause, there's an art to it, and we're still working through that. And so we want participation in that process, and we hope we can get that from likes of you. If you're not participating in the RRC or whatnot, we would love to get that going. So that's really, there's a lot of art to this process. But once you do that, then you have to go through this impact and likelihood. You basically need to say, okay, if it happens, how big of a problem is it? Again, I'm going to pick on wildfires, and you'll see why I am, because that's one of our top risks. How severe is it? And what does severe mean? Does that mean to you a single entity? Does that mean to the region you're in? Does that mean the whole Western interconnection, right? I doubt we're going to live in a world where the entire Western United States and Canada is on fire. If we do, we probably got bigger problems than this. So we need to kind of figure out, well, what type of severity are we talking about? And then what's the likelihood? And there's art to that as well, because we're trying to look for the most plausible likely scenario and then assess its impact. We're not really looking for that, 1 in a million years meteor strike type of a risk. We're trying to say like, okay, what is the most plausible to happen in any given maybe year or 2-year cycle and assess that severity, right? So again, dialing this in is still something that, we want feedback on. Again, when you'll see what we're talking about here, some of these risks can creep on us very fast overnight, right? The cybersecurity ones often are overnight, right? When we're hacked, there's not a lot of early warning systems on it. But drought, aridification drought, we know that's coming on, and we have time to know that things are getting worse as it is now, right? So this is kind of what's gone into a lot of this methodology. So with that, I'm going to share with you the risk register. I'm going to give you a moment. You can either, and this is public, by the way, you can use this QR code. I'll come back to this slide if you want. You can download it. I'm going to show you where to download it, where to get it, but we definitely want to share and get this in front of you. So to introduce you to where to find it, if you don't want to use the QR code or pull it up on your phone, under our committee structure, under the reliability risk, if you scroll down to pretty much the bottom accordion here, you're going to see this risk management process. And you'll find in here, one, the PDF. This PDF is what guides our process. This is the one you can see I've got open here. It's, if you want to really, if you really want to put yourself to sleep, but no, please do come over here, read this document, and you'll see exactly all the details that are going into this process. And then we have the risk register itself, and you can download a copy. So this is what I want to bring up and I want to show you, so you get a bit of a sense of what's going on here in this. It can get very busy, maybe very daunting at first glance. So the way you can read this is just kind of from left to right here. Here we basically assigned numbers to these. We put them in categories. This is probably going to be the one where maybe you want to filter on expertise or something. So if you've got folks that are physical security folks, they might want to go to the physical security ones, cybersecurity, inverter-based or grid transformation items, right? So you can use this to help filter if that helps. You can then look at the risk title. Right now, I've got it sorted by the current weighting from high to low, just because I think that we just naturally, as humans, want to know, okay, what's at the top, and then let's kind of work down to the less risky. So just for sake of conversation, right, you can see right now large and prolonged heat waves. I talked to wildfire, that's down here at number 5. So you can see, as I mentioned, we have these condition, consequence, and cause statements in here. This is, in my opinion, the most critical part of this, is this risk statement. If we get this wrong, everything else will, it will derail it. And so this is where, like I said, the art form comes in. These risk titles are there just for the sake of evoking a quick understanding. When I said large and prolonged heat waves, all of you thought about, okay, what you understand about heat waves. But we really want to get into, okay, what is the condition we're talking about, and what are the consequences that we're talking about with these heat waves? And if so, we can then start assessing, as I mentioned before, the severity of that consequence and what's the likelihood, and that helps us get to a score. And again, we can rank from there. So hopefully, as you get into this, maybe when you're looking at this yourself, you can look through these risk statements and see, does this meet your understanding, right? Is this something that would shape your own risk assessments? And is this something that you can then leverage with your leadership, your senior leadership, if if WECC and the RRC has agreed that this is the #1 risk, large and prolonged heat waves, then what are we going to do about it, right? Is your entity prepared for that? So I want to kind of take you through now. So this section here is the initial risk assessment. Shall I say this is the most inherent risk-based risk assessment. We then went through with the RRC. So this is where we involved many people from the Reliability Risk Committee to go through and do a somewhat similar assessment, but looking more into the what can we do about it world. So yes, there's still a likely score here, but we had them go through and look at these other factors. Materiality is somewhat like the consequence, but we needed to look into, well, is this controllable? In other words, okay, large and prolonged heat waves. So what? What can I do about it? I can't do anything. I can't stop the weather. So yeah, then we have to factor that in. We have to say that's uncontrollable. And if that's uncontrollable, then how does that affect the risk score? You can't stop the cause. So now we have to then look at, okay, but can we reduce the impact when it does happen? And so that's, and then we look at span, right? How long is it going to last when it does occur? This one's obviously greater than 2 months. In other words, this is not something that's going to come and go away in a day. This is something that's going to come on slowly. That's why we've got velocity here. It's going to come on slowly, and then we're going to live with it for a very long time. And that's what's meeting one of the higher risk scores when you look at it this way. Now I'm going to resort it by that assessment. So when you look at it this way, things start to shift a little bit more. And that's where we've kind of then moved into, before I go into this next section here, that's where we've moved into the next problem statement. Oh, by the way, yeah, so risk register, we've got 31 currently identified risks. We've got 20 that are under review. You can propose any at any time. We've got an initiation form, again, another QR code here, but to be honest with you, it's just right here. It's on the website, so you can get there. So if you need to submit any, you can certainly do so. But really where we're moving to is what's a risk appetite? And this is something you'll need to ask within your own organizations about what's your own appetite, or tolerability is what the term ISO 31000 uses. We often look at this and it's very easy for us to quickly say something like, oh, high risk, we don't like high risk items, right? So we should reduce anything that's high risk. So when you look on the risk register, if these are high, your gut tells you, okay, I don't like high risk. The term high risk makes me nervous. The reality is, it's amazing how much risk you can tolerate when you start getting into, okay, what can we do about it, right? Or what's the cost benefit? So when it comes right down to it, most risks have to be debated on their own merits, right? And that's where you start to learn what your own appetite is. And this often is organic. We like to often say, okay, we're going to put in a formal, we don't, anything above high, we're going to reduce. But the reality is it becomes an organic discussion where you start to look at, say, something like wildfires. Again, I'm going to pick on that one. That's one of our highest. And you start to debate, well, what can we do in this section of the Western Interconnection? What can we do in this section? And it turns out it's going to be too costly to do X, Y, and Z for preparedness. So maybe we're going to do more of the protection system shutoffs or something like that, because we can't trim the trees back far enough, right? Things, that the environmental protection stops us from doing. There's all these factors that make it so you start dialing in over time what your true risk appetite tolerability is. And so we're in that phase right now. We've worked with the RRC. We've identified a number of items that they will, with their subcommittee, subforums, working with WECC, some of our WECC advisory groups, you name it, will take action to reduce. And I'm going to just real quick filter on that so you can see what we're talking about here. So we've got 11 right now that have been decided from an RRC perspective will take reduction action. We're working on trying to develop those now. This is separate from WECC's regional risk priorities, reliability risk priorities, the RRPs, and the board may decide something separate there. Just to kind of give you a sense of what the treatment options are, and these are standard across pretty much any risk assessment methodology. You know, when we say the term risk acceptance, that usually gets people very nervous because it feels like, oh, if I'm accepting the risk, it also feels like I'm saying anything goes. And that shouldn't be the term, it shouldn't be the methodology that's thought about in your organization or even of this approach. But it feels that way. It almost feels like, oh, if we accept the risk of driving, then that means we're okay if we take the seat belts off, we remove the airbags, we loosen the brakes, we drive faster. Like, no, that's not really it. Just because we accept the risk of driving doesn't mean we accept the risk of any behavior or any lack of maintenance on the car or whatever. Same goes when we're saying we accept a risk here on the Western Interconnection, we're accepting it as it is or the direction that it's going, inclusive of the current controls. So if we accept a cybersecurity risk, it doesn't mean everybody should stop doing what they're doing to mitigate it. It just means it's within our appetite. The one that we most often talk about is reduction. It's the one that feels like, okay, we're going to actually do something about it. So I don't think I need to talk about that one too much. Risk transference means we share the risk. We can't always do this alone. And sometimes we can't even do it all. So that's why we buy insurance. Again, back to my driving analogy. We accept the risk of driving, but only to a certain extent. So we go get car insurance so that we know we're covered, and we want all the other automobile drivers out there to do the same so that we're all kind of transferring some of that risk around. In our world, here in the Western Interconnection, we know we can't do it all. So we need WECC, or we need NERC to do some of the work. So that's a transference. We've got things that are maybe more done by others, like when it comes to natural gas availability. We can't necessarily do all of that, so we need the natural gas groups to do theirs, right? So there's a lot of transference that certainly can and does happen. Risk avoidance, this is one we don't talk about a lot just because it's the most costly. It's the one that basically says we either need to stop the work that we're doing or we need to put in so many controls that the threat can never intersect with the vulnerability. So avoidance is it's an option, but it's costly. It's not one that we usually often do, and nothing's been applied for avoidance here. And then, you know, basically if we don't do any treatment option, we're basically saying, look, we need to look at this further. So that's what you'll see in this risk register kind of out here next. As you get farther out, you start to look at these treatment options. So this is where we're, as I mentioned, we're looking to have different groups take on different actions. So for extreme natural events, we're kicking off an advisory group that's going to be WECC led. We still don't have members yet. We're going to be pulling members from probably the RC, the RAC, and I'm not sure exactly where. Again, we're very early stages. But we want to look at these three options and say, look, what could we do? What monitoring activity could happen here, and what's the possible reduction? Same with the cybersecurity ones. We're going to have the cybersecurity forum look at theirs. We're going to have the RAC look at theirs, and then we've got other advisory groups. So that's the next steps that we're going with this. This will likely have a very long cycle to it, probably over the next 12 to 24 months before we really understand, are we making a dent? Are these treatment options that we're going to put in place actually going to reduce the risk? The whole point should be that we can bring these scores down, or maybe at worst case scenario, just hold them steady so that they're not getting worse as a possibility. So that's a lot of long-winded talk. Oh, maybe that's right. I'm hoping I generated some questions. Actually start getting your questions ready. I've already alluded some of this as far as where we're going with it. We're kind of here working towards July to get these initial treatment plans. We're hoping that by October, we're really starting to execute on those. Through December and through the next rest of the year, we're going to keep doing the refresh, meaning coming back up here, this outer circle, we just need to keep washing, rinsing, repeating, looking at the risk, identifying it, and just constantly being in this cycle. So that's kind of where we're going, beyond getting these treatment plants. So with that, I hope I've garnered some questions, some piqued some interest. I can't see the chat, so I don't know why.
I do have a question for you to start
Great.
us off. It says, is the controllability column considering effectiveness of the internal controls?
Ha 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 ha. Wonderful question. Thank you. So there's a lot that goes into this. You're right. The controllability is either, and we debated these, depends on where we're debating us. So like the cybersecurity forum, when we debated these, we talked a lot about what can individual entities do to control these. So like insider threat, how good our internal entity controls to develop that one, because that really is going to be on a case by case basis, an entity by entity, right? You're not going to go tell your entity, your peers or your neighbors that they have to do X, Y, and Z on their insider threat. So we had to kind of look at them on the individual level. However, these, like extreme natural events, they're not so one-offs and siloed as are the man-made issues. So controllability started getting into, well, hold on, when it comes to wildfires, my neighbor may cause one, but it may affect me, or I may cause and vice versa, or these just may be a cigarette butt out the window. We can't really necessarily do that. And by the way, wildfire is one we landed on non-BPS started wildfires. These are only wildfires that are started just through the lightning, the cigarette butts, the you name it. And it turns out, that's where we flagged that one completely uncontrollable because we can't factor that in. So we may someday put on a wildfire that is, shall we say, entity control or entity started. And we may flag the controllability a bit different because then we're also going to look at, the personal safety programs and other things as part of controllability. But yeah, so you got to base it kind of on each one and then look at that controllability and try to factor in both all of the external and internal factors. But no, I appreciate that because these columns all have been heavily debated.
Great, thank you. We had a question asking for the link, and I tried to copy it, and for some reason today, every time I pasted a link, it has broken on me. So I will get the correct link in there for you folks, just a moment. But we do have some other questions. Next one says, thanks for the great risk presentation, very informative. How does this or will this connect to compliance oversight?
Been waiting for that question. So the frank answer is it depends. I hate that answer, as do you all. But the reality is it probably will. When we look at this, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, this is feeding CMAP areas of focus and vice versa coming back. Our board, like I said, is looking at our reliability risk priorities and basing it on these as well and deciding what we're going to focus on. Those ultimately do have to make their way back to the compliance program and say, what can you do to move the needle? And so through our monitoring piece, we will probably be looking at some of these. What that looks like, anybody's guess. This does not mean we're looking for compliance or non-compliance when it comes to heat waves. We're looking for how are you entities addressing this risk, and can this inform the risk register, and can you help bring down the actual score through your best practices? But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. It's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but
Feel free to submit a follow-up if we need more there. All right. This next one's a little bit long, so let me know if you need me to reread any portion of it. It says, the risk analysis overview slide seems to indicate the impacts the event itself would have on the BES. But is there a level assessment for the likelihood that the event would ever occur at these different levels? An analogy, 99% chance that it's going to rain, a 65% chance that it will rain 3 to 4 inches in an hour around the Seattle basin in a minute, 2% chance that there will be a rainstorm that Noah's Ark will need to be used for the upcoming downpour.
I appreciate that. So that's part of this art form that we're discussing and trying to figure out how do we apply it both at the Western Interconnection bulk power system and how do we make it more, shall we say, localized. And it's funny, I've got a meeting after this one to talk about kind of that regional perspective. So our initial factors here is severe is kind of bulk power system, North America. We've kind of stolen some of that language from NERC. Major is an RC area, and then large portions of an RC area, that kind of thing. So you're right. When it comes to things like, where's it raining? We're probably not going to see it where, we're talking the Noah's Ark thing where it's going to rain and flood out the entire Western United States, Canada. So, but could that happen in, the 1,000-year storm? Possibly. We're again trying to figure out what is the most possible or probable scenario over the next maybe 12 to 24 months and that. So that's where some of this art form comes in, and the debate comes in on what do we have these condition and consequences statement? Are we, because it may be that we're looking at something that's regional. The 2009 San Diego, outage, for 4 to 6 hours for a metropolitan area. That's kind of a big deal, but it's still not. That's not the whole Western Interconnection. Well, is that what we're looking for when we're talking about outages? Still something we're dialing in to make sure we got the right risk. And if it turns out the number one, the risk is more regional and not bulk power system, we'll write that, we'll put it in writing, we'll score it out, and we'll go from there. But yeah, that's part of the art and science of it. Appreciate the question, though. It's a great question.
Okay. Were there discussions with other regions to align the approach to the columns and risk?
Thank you for that. One is we're still in the infancy of this. However, we stole/plagiarized this from CERC with their permission. So they helped us to develop this. They're about 2 years ahead of us in their risk modeling. So they've been working with their constituents a little bit longer. And so we learned some of their lessons. We took some of their documents and helped to build out this methodology. As far as our other sister regions, we have not. We've shared now ours with them, and I don't know where they're going with it. But no, we've never sat down in a room and said, "Hey, let's everybody get our models together." Again, I'm picking on CERC because they seem to be the ones. We did go do a little fact finding. They seem to be ones a little bit ahead of us. So that's why we've tried to learn their lessons.
Okay. Can you speak to more how accepting risk exists within the regulatory environment?
So this kind of comes down from the fact that NERC has told us to do more of a risk-based approach. I'm hoping I'm getting to the question you're talking about. They've told us to do more of a risk-based approach to our activities. And this part of this risk process and risk register is to help define that. We have, I don't want to pick on the past too much, but I would say that we've kind of been pulling things out of the air, in the last several years, more like extreme natural events. We've just put that as a topic on our banner. We've said this is a thing, it's important, but we've not gone to the level of saying, yeah, but what kind of E&E are we talking about here? So now we're moving to this level. to then hopefully inform and be able to show NERC and FERC that we are doing the risk-based approach, which we have been doing, but now we're starting to drive down to not just saying, oh, we're looking at extreme natural events. We're starting to say, look, we've prioritized large and prolonged heat waves, cold weather, and wildfire at the top of all of the E&E, and those are the ones we're going to focus on. So that hopefully kind of gets to your question about how are we doing, doing this under the regulatory environment. It's part of our mandate. Now you may say to yourself, yes, but I can't see O&P or SIP standards that apply to these. And you're right, there's not technically a SIP standard that's insider threat. We got SIP 4 that's about access controls. You've got, personnel risk assessments kind of thing. They kind of circle the drain of insider threats, but it's not, none of you are required to actually have an insider threat program, and that's fine. One, we can still try to figure out, are you still addressing insider threat through both SIP and non-SIP risk activities? And if not, can we have you, do more? Is there more that you can do? Again, not for the fear of enforcement or non-compliance. Can you do so just because you and your peers have all gotten together and said these are risks and you're all focusing on them? Again, not because of, legal enforcement or compliance or non-compliance regulatory issues. It's because we've all agreed it's a risk. So, hopefully I got your question and didn't sound too much like a politician.
All right, we have another question that's come in that says, are the definitions and assumptions documented on the WECC website? For instance, the wildfire is not utility caused.
It's there by, shall we say, by what's not included. We've debated this in RRC sessions. You can probably go back to recordings, but no, we're not that mature. That's why I'm kind of homing and humming. We would like to get our risk register where we can then document like all of these discussions, the outcomes, the whatevers. We're going to work on an internal tool to do that. A spreadsheet just doesn't lend itself to that detail, but we agree we can't let these conversations be lost to history, because somebody else is going to come along and say, wait, why don't I see wildfires caused by the industry on here, right? That could be a criticism. And if we don't have that documented somewhere, well, we're right for that criticism. So I totally hear you. We've thought about it ourselves. We just have to mature our ability to capture and record that. So we'll get there, I guess, is what I'm trying to, the short answer.
Okay, we did have a follow-up come in on that question about how accepting risks exist within a regulatory environment.
Okay.
They came back and said, or standards that would allow that risk acceptance.
Aha. So now you're kind of getting into, at least I'm the SIP guy, you're getting into kind of the what I'll call the older SIP style, that are basically you'll do something in 24 hours, or you'll do something with X, and then moving into like the newer SIP 13, SIP 12s that let you, identify what your risk is and your risk acceptance. Yeah, it's hard to answer that. I think we're going there. One thing we've talked about, at least in the group I'm at here at WECC, is how much would this be used or could be used to shape future standards. Now, we all know there's a very long cycle with that. We hope that this becomes an input, like if there's major glaring deficits to the standards, could this be used to fill those in? But the other one is kind of, okay, can the standards allow for an entity to assess the risk if it's within risk acceptance or at-risk tolerability, and it's acceptable kind of to the industry? Could that be done? I just think we're a long way off for getting any of the standards, like the SIP ones that I'm familiar with, to truly be this. This is where, again, we're not getting into my opinion, where kind of NERC and FERC came out and said, hey, do everything risk-based approach. And I think now we're learning a lot of those lessons, and it's going to take a while for that to all come back in the wash and actually have real impact on the standards. I think for quite a while, you're just going to be living with standards that are quite prescriptive. Just again, we're talking my opinion at this point.
Thank you. Does WECC anticipate monitoring risk mitigation progress for these risk areas? For example, will there be analysis of what is getting better or worse?
Yes, that is key to this, but I'm going to share with you. So that's key with this, right? We have to do this monitoring and review piece. You can kind of see here on the side, because it doesn't do any good to assess the risk and then put in a treatment plan and then just hope and pray that the treatment plan worked. You actually have to go see, is the treatment effective? And that's the intent of it. Let's put it this way. It's the intent of the treatment, right? So you'll see over here, was the mitigation effective? If so, what, how is it scored? What's the residual scoring? Like we've put placeholders in for that. I'm going to tell you aspirationally, we want to get there. Measuring it is difficult. So that's where it's going to be kind of part of the art form of as we define the making activities. So let's just say for wildfire, we decide one of the only things we can do about this is educate all of the entities that are in the wildfire area. Okay, well, what's the expected reduction? And can we measure that? Is it an effective reduction strategy? That's going to be difficult, right? Especially if the development of the mitigation isn't on entity by entity basis. If you all go implement some great wildfire control, but you have no way of informing us about it, we may not know. So yeah, that's going to be tough. I'm going to just be flat out honest with you. It's going to be tough for us to actually truly understand, did the mitigation do what we expected it to do? These are great questions, man. You guys are awesome.
All right. Can this be mapped to NERC standards and requirements so that it could be meaningful as a loop back into the standards process if the standards are doing what they're supposed to, and to further align resources towards the right standard revision areas?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It's not on here. We've got on our internal version of this, we have got a column that has that in there. I'm sure we will share it at some point. I think the reason, I could tell you the reason we haven't done it now. We've not sat down and just done a super thorough analysis, right? We basically went through and said, okay, which standards can apply to wildfire, cold weather, blah, 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 right? And we've kind of done just a quick review of that. And we haven't, shall I say, matured it. So if I were to put it in front of you, you could probably criticize the heck out of it and then I'd be embarrassed. But I like where you're thinking, because you're right. Ultimately, and that's why we started with it. We want to know what's already being done about this, right? And if we've got a standard that covers it, or at least in part covers it, let's at least give credit where credit's due on that side, right? We've also got some other stuff on our internal version of like what's being done is white papers and stuff. So we've got a lot more information there. Again, not ready to pull the trigger on it, but I like what you're thinking. You're absolutely right. And that's part of our maturity.
Okay, I haven't had another question come in for a moment. We did have a request for the link to your process document, so I have posted that in the chat for folks. And
Great.
that was enough time for the next question to come. Is it anticipated at some point in the future that the risk levels assigned can and will be confirmed to be correct? What metrics might be anticipated to be used for this assessment?
Yeah, so as far as this analysis goes, so this is one that we WECC conduct. And so as far as going through and redoing that one, that will be more of our annual process to look at and see, have we dialed it in? More importantly, though, really is this RRC one. We've been through the committees, the subcommittees, forums, and gone through and scored these. We've basically left it open that we can revisit these at any time that the RRC chairs want to, the subcommittee forums. So like cybersecurity, we've got the chair over that at any time. He and or his committee can revisit these and these scores. If it turns out, if we want to recommend a different mitigation decision, that is up to all of those chairs. So we're open to it. It's always in flux and can be revisited. I don't want to, as the term I use, none of this should be considered in stone. It's in jello. It has a bit of firmness to it, but that's about it. It can be changed at any time with the information. So if you see something on here that you disagree with, please get with your RRC rep, get with, or your forum members, if it's a cyber, physical, whatever it is, and have them raise it and bring it, and we can revisit these anytime. Happy to do so.
Okay, the questions have slowed. I haven't had one come in for a moment. Thank you both so much for being here to discuss this today. It was clearly a topic of great interest, and we had a lot of great questions. So thank you, all of you who submitted those. Again, I'm not seeing any hands raised or any additional questions, so we will go ahead and conclude for today. Thank you so much for having been here, and we will see you next month on May 16th at the same time, 2 o'clock Mountain. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
To everyone, thank you.
Bye-bye.